I talk a lot about getting a therapist and making sure you're seeing a therapist and all that sort of stuff. And I'll stand by those recommendations 100%. Problem is people struggle taking that first step to walking into the therapist's office. They're embarrassed, they're shy, they're nervous, they've never done it before. It's a complete stranger that they're proposing opening up to. And as with any human interactions, some therapists simply suck. They're rude, or they just don't get it, they're not empathetic enough, or they haven't had the lived experience that you would hope for. So with that in mind, I wanted to quickly just run down my thoughts on this topic. For me, regular therapy is a mental health must. I see one every 4 to 6 weeks and more when I'm struggling. And the reason being is, well, there's a few reasons. One, a therapist that is competent and good is trained and has experience dealing with the issues that you're facing, right? So for me, if now that I've found a good therapist, I'm able to express myself and ask for advice and get insights into my mental state. My therapist is great because she offers advice that surprises me. I obviously talk a lot about mental health and mental illness, and I have a background in it having studied, right? So for me personally, I needed a therapist that knew more than me about psychology. That's just something that I needed to have, because I felt that if I was in a place that was more knowledgeable or had more insight, what could they possibly hope to tell me? Now that's just me, that's just what I needed. But the reason I'm sharing that is because you may need certain things from a therapist. So if you go to one and you find it and they're not quite right for you, find another one. That's fine. It's fine to keep searching until you find someone that works for you. So let's say you're searching around and it's your first session with a new therapist. I've found it best, in my opinion, to just grit my teeth and share as much as possible, just from the onset. And this is hurtful and it's painful and it's tough. But the reason I do it is because I know that once I rip that Band-Aid off, once we get down to the core issues that I'm facing, I can be better healed and I'll know if that therapist is right for me. So despite, quote unquote, not trusting the therapist straight away, I'll still share a lot of myself. Because I want to get a good read on the therapist and know if they can help me and where they're at. Because I don't want to waste my time and then subsequently my mental state moving forward for days or weeks or months on a therapist that is not great. So my advice to you would be, number one, find a therapist. Just do it. And if you don't have a good connection or a good feeling with them, fine, find a new one. And when you do find someone, start opening up and start trusting. Have some faith that it will work, right? They are trained, it's their job. It's the same way that if you went to a personal trainer, you would expect them to get results and you would look at their clients, you would look at their bodies and you'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm seeing those results. The same thing is true for psychologists. I would also suggest that if you're with a psychologist and the needle isn't moving, in the sense they're not making any shifts with your mental state, maybe consider finding a different one. Because, they might be lovely, kind, nice people, but if they're not helping you, and by help, it could be, it's sort of dependent on what your goals are and where you're at. But if you're suicidal and you're attempting suicide and you're self-harming and you've seen a psychologist every week for a year and nothing's changed, probably likely that psychologist isn't right for you. You know what I mean? If your goal is to become more sociable or get out and about more and you haven't been able to following their advice, probably not right for you. There are people that do suit you and are catered towards whatever you've got going on. But speaking of that, you need to be careful with going in with a preemptive diagnosis. So for example, if I went into a psychologist and I was like, hey, I think I've got this, or I went into a psychologist that specialized in a particular condition, they're looking for that as a symptomology. So I generally turn and say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with in my day-to-day life. I'm suffering from these symptoms. This is how I'm feeling right now. And only later on will I talk about what previous psychologists or what people have diagnosed me with, because I want them to get a fresh new read on what I'm presenting with now. Because personalities, mental states are always changing. Yes, some conditions can't be cured, but most can be moved or at least changed. So I'd like the psychologist to get a new read on what I'm presenting with right now. And that way I'm best catering for where I'm at. in the moment. And I suppose the final thing I want to suggest is, if talking therapy isn't working, take medication. Yeah, I lean towards talking therapy because I feel like if you can address the problem through lifestyle changes and through mental state changes and sort of like actions that you can take, for me, that just sits better than taking medication. However, for some people and in some circumstances, myself included, medication is a must. When I was at my worst, I was put onto a antidepressant and I had to cycle through 3 or 4 before I found one that stopped the depression and suicide. And it kept me alive. Like, to be honest, I wouldn't be here if I didn't sort of grit through those side effects and keep trying until I found a medication that worked. It helped. Now, unfortunately, it had the side effect of sort of limiting my range of experience. I didn't experience the highs, I didn't experience the lows. I was sort of living in this middle band. But I was able to stay in that middle band for long enough to survive and to sort of get my life in order in a way that I could start slowly implementing talking therapies like psychology and meditation, and start sort of getting my shit together with exercise and a whole bunch of other stuff. Eventually, I was able to come off the medication. That being said, if I get worse, if I start self-harming again, if I get depressed, or if I get addicted to something, I'll be back on the medication because I know it works and I know it helps despite having the side effects. And there's obviously other medications that I could try. The point I'm trying to say is taking medications is a far better solution than killing yourself. Put simply, right? You're alive. From a place of being alive, you can take action. Yeah? Might not be the end result, the end goal that you're after, but you can take action. So I suppose in summary, what I'm trying to say is get a therapist, make sure you're seeing them regularly, open up to them. Even if you're not quite ready yet, just rip that Band-Aid off and say, hey, this is where I'm at now, please help. If you're finding that they're not helping, find a new therapist. But just don't give up on therapy itself. And if you need to, if things aren't being moved, if the needle isn't being moved, change therapists. If you need to, go on medication. There's a lot of options that you can try, but just, you have to be willing to take that step. You have to be willing to put one foot forward after the other and risk losing a little bit of faith, risk opening up to, what accounts to a complete stranger, risk them suggesting things that might hurt, risk implementing stuff in your life that will move the needle. I suppose one final thing on this is, it can be tempting to, and almost a bit of a trap, getting trapped in your diagnoses or in your mental states. For ages, I would be going, well, I've got depression, I've got suicide problems, I've got anxiety, post-traumatic stress, history of abuse at the hands of the people that came into my father's house, etc., etc. And I would sort of wear it as my personality or my identity, for lack of a better expression. That would be me. And from that place of trauma or mental illness, it's hard to move or hard to improve, because if I was improving, I would be sort of, in a way, losing my identity that I'd built up. So part of therapy, part of recovering, is building a new, healthy identity that moves beyond, that grows, that is you now healing, as opposed to you dealing and living in the past of the trauma and of your current mental state. So that is another layer of stuff that you're going to need to work through, in the sense of, you need to start identifying with where you are now as opposed to the mental illness or the past trauma. At least that was the case with me. If you can relate, please comment below, and I would love to hear from you. So contact me on social media at Zach P. Phillips, or via my website at zachary-phillips.com. I've got blogs, podcasts, books, video courses, a whole bunch of stuff up there that I know people are relating to, and I think you will as well. Check it out. Catch ya.